They call you a mystery, a paradox, the kind of person people think they understand, right up until they don't. You're calm, but there's a storm behind your eyes. You crave connection, yet you disappear for days without warning. You can read anyone like a book, but when it comes to yourself, the pages are written in another language. You might be a Sigma INFJ, a personality so rare and contradictory, it's almost mythical. Part lone wolf, part empath, part philosopher, part rebel. You're the kind of person who can comfort a stranger's soul and then vanish into solitude like you never existed. You care deeply, but you'll never show it first. You love fiercely, but only from a distance that feels safe. You want to be seen, but only by someone who can see through you. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance. Philosophers call it duality. But for you, it's just Tuesday. You're not trying to be mysterious. You just exist at the intersection of intuition and independence. You're not playing hard to get. You're guarding something sacred, your peace. This is the Sigma INFJ Paradox. 7 hidden truths that explain why you can feel both invisible and unforgettable at the same time. By the end of this video, you'll see why you're not impossible to understand. Like, you're just operating on a different frequency. And once you recognize that, everything about you, the solitude, the silence, the contradictions, finally makes sense. So buckle in, because we're about to dive deep into the psychology, the emotion, and the quiet fire that makes the Sigma INFJ one of the most complex minds on the planet. And fair warning, by the end of this, you might finally understand yourself in a way that no one else ever has. Let's dive right in. All right, first thing first. The idealist who secretly judges humanity. You love humanity, but sometimes you really don't like people. You believe in compassion, empathy, kindness, the whole spiritual TED Talk package, yet you find yourself scrolling through social media thinking we might actually be doomed. It's not that you've lost hope in people. It's that your hope is too big for how small most people choose to live. You want to believe in the collective good, but every time you see cruelty, hypocrisy, or ignorance, a little part of your idealism quietly dies and is replaced with sarcasm. You've learned to use humor as armor, cynicism as protection, and silence as judgment. This is where the Sigma INFJ paradox shows its sharpest edge. You hold yourself to impossible moral standards, but you've realized that most people don't. You want to forgive, but you can't forget. You want to believe the best in others, but you've seen too much to be naive. So, you smile politely, nod through conversations that feel shallow, and quietly analyze people's motives like a human lie detector. And when you find contradictions in them, you withdraw. Not out of superiority, but out of exhaustion. You're not judging from above. You're retreating from disappointment. Psychologically, this inner tension reflects something called moral idealism fatigue. You see the potential in everyone, and when they don't live up to it, your empathy turns into quiet disillusionment. It's the shadow side of high emotional intelligence. The awareness that most people operate on autopilot, driven by impulse rather than insight. Your mind screams, "We could be better," while your heart whispers, "But maybe we won't." And that gap between what could be and what is, that's where your frustration lives. What makes this paradox even more fascinating is that your criticism comes from care. You don't judge because you hate people. You judge because you believed in them. You want to see growth, but you're tired of trying to inspire it in others who don't even see the problem. So you pull back. You become selective with your empathy, almost strategic with your kindness. You stop trying to save everyone and start protecting your peace, which ironically makes you seem cold to the very people you once tried to heal. Here's the quiet truth, though. Your disappointment in humanity is really disappointment in how much of yourself you've given to it. You expect depth because you offer depth. You expect honesty because you speak it. And when the world doesn't mirror that back, it feels personal, almost like betrayal. But don't mistake that hurt for bitterness. It's proof that you still care. It's the ache of an idealist who sees the light in everyone, even when they choose to live in the dark. So yes, you might secretly judge humanity, but that judgment isn't cruelty. It's heartbreak in disguise. You still believe people can change. You just no longer expect them to. And that's the cruelest kind of wisdom, the kind that loves the world deeply, but trusts it carefully. And next up, we've got the leader who hides in the shadows. You never asked to lead. It just keeps happening. You walk into a room, and without saying much, the energy shifts. People start listening, even when you're just existing. You're not loud, not flashy, not desperate for your control, yet somehow you always end up being the one others look to when things fall apart. It's not charisma in the traditional sense, it's presence. That quiet, steady, self-assured aura that says, I've already thought 10 steps ahead, but I'm not going to brag about it. This is the Sigma INFJ's paradox of leadership. You don't crave authority, but you embody it. You'd rather stay behind the curtain, pulling the strings in silence, while others stand in the spotlight you deliberately avoided. You lead through influence, not instruction, through calm reasoning, not commands. You see the bigger picture, you feel the emotional currents in the room, and somehow you always know how to steer things without making it look like you're steering at all. Psychologically, this stems from something fascinating. A combination of introverted intuition and high empathy. Your mind naturally maps out outcomes before others even realize a decision needs to be made. You sense how people will react, how situations will unfold, and you quietly make adjustments to prevent chaos. Leadership for you isn't about power. It's about protection. You lead because it hurts to watch others stumble when you already saw the warning signs miles away. But this ability also isolates you. People follow you, but they rarely understand you. They see your calm confidence and assume you're fine, even when you're crumbling inside. You carry the emotional weight of everyone around you, absorbing tension so others can relax. You become the unspoken anchor, and anchors, by nature, stay below the surface. That's the tragedy of the Sigma INFJ leader. Everyone depends on you, yet few ever ask how you're doing. And maybe that's why you resist the spotlight. You've seen how power corrupts, how ego destroys authenticity. You don't want to be idolized. You want to be effective. You'd rather whisper the truth into the right ears than shout it across a crowd. And because of that, your influence lasts longer. You're not the boss who demands respect. You're the one people respect even in your absence. But here's the quiet irony. Your avoidance of leadership is what makes you a true leader. In a world full of noise, your silence commands attention. In a culture obsessed with control, your restraint becomes power. You're not leading to be seen. You're leading because someone has to keep the light on while everyone else chases their shadows. And when the storm passes, you'll disappear. Again, back into the background, back into your solitude, not because you don't care, but because you've already done what real leaders do. You guided without glory. And maybe that's your greatest paradox of all. The one who leads best is the one who never wanted to lead at all. And thirdly, the romantic who runs from love. You want love that feels cosmic, the kind that dissolves boundaries, that feels like your souls have been orbiting each other for centuries. You don't fall in love halfway, you dive in like it's a religion. You crave that wordless, psychic connection where two people understand each other beyond logic. But when someone finally comes close enough to offer that depth, something inside you panics. Your heart whispers, "This is it," while your instincts scream, "Run." This is the Sigma INFJ's love paradox. You crave intimacy so deeply that it terrifies you. You want someone to see every layer of you, but you fear what will happen once they do. You don't fear rejection, You fear absorption. You fear losing your identity inside someone else's emotional gravity. For you, love has never been light. It's an earthquake disguised as a smile. And even though you want to be known, being known feels like surrendering control over the only safe space you've ever had, your inner world. Psychologically, this stems from emotional intensity and hyperattunement. You feel connection on such a high frequency that it can become overwhelming, even disorienting. You start analyzing every word, every silence, every shift in energy, not because you're paranoid, but because your brain is trained to look for emotional patterns. It's what makes you a master at reading others, but it also makes you terrified of being misread. When love feels uncertain, you overthink. When it feels too certain, you overprotect. You might tell yourself you're being cautious, but sometimes you're just sabotaging something that could have been beautiful. You pull away, create space, test their patience, all to confirm if they'll chase you. And when they don't, you tell yourself it wasn't real love anyway. But deep down, you know it's not about them failing the test. It's about you being afraid to fail in love. Because when you love, you give everything. And when it breaks, it feels like a personal apocalypse. Ironically, this avoidance makes you even more alluring. People feel that mix of intensity and distance and mistake it for mystery. They see your emotional depth, but can't quite access it. And that creates a magnetic pull. You become the one they can't forget. The quiet enigma who makes them feel something profound and slightly painful. And that's the paradox. You hide from love, yet you leave a trail of people who never stop wondering about you. But here's the truth beneath it all. You're not afraid of love. You're afraid of its cost. You've been through emotional wars that taught you passion, and pain often share the same address. So you build walls and call them standards. You isolate and call it peace. Yet, no matter how many times you swear off vulnerability, a part of you still believes in that once-in-a-lifetime connection. You still look for it in music, in books, in the quiet spaces between your thoughts. Because at your core, you're not a cynic. You're a romantic with battle scars. You still want that one person who sees through your layers, touches your mind before your body, and makes you feel safe enough to stay. Until then, you'll keep pretending you're fine, alone. But the truth is, you're not running from love. You're just waiting for a love strong enough to catch you. Fourth on the list, the healer who needs healing. You've always been the one people come to when their world falls apart. The calm voice in chaos. The emotional paramedic who patches everyone up, even when you're bleeding yourself. You give advice that sounds like wisdom, empathy that feels like medicine, and comfort that makes people believe you have everything figured out. But the truth? You're often running on empty. You're the therapist friend who cries quietly in the shower, the listener who's never really heard, the healer who's forgotten how to heal themselves. You've built your identity around being strong for others, but that strength came from survival, not serenity. You learned early on that it was safer to care than to need. That love was earned through usefulness. So you became indispensable, the one who fixes, so no one has to see how broken you feel. But the paradox is that in trying to save everyone, you slowly start to disappear. You pour your energy into other people's wounds until your own start whispering, "Hey, remember me?" Psychologically, this loop comes from what researchers call helper's fatigue. It's emotional burnout wrapped in compassion. You're not addicted to fixing people. You're addicted to the sense of purpose it gives you. Healing others becomes a way of avoiding your own pain. It feels productive, noble even, but underneath it's just deflection disguised as generosity. Every time you say, "I'm fine," while giving someone else a pep talk, you reinforce the belief that your worth comes from helping, not from being. And because you understand pain so deeply, people trust you instantly. They sense your empathy like a frequency, that quiet, stabilizing energy that makes chaos feel manageable. But here's what they don't see. Empathy doesn't protect you from pain. It magnifies it. You feel so everything, their heartbreak, their fears, their doubts, as if it were your own. And when you're constantly carrying other people's emotions, eventually your own start getting lost in the noise. You tell yourself it's noble to put others first, but secretly, you wish someone would notice that you're tired, that maybe the healer needs a place to rest too. You want someone who doesn't just admire your strength, but gently questions it. Someone who asks, "Who takes care of you?" and actually waits for an answer. But instead, you keep smiling, keep giving, keep saving everyone but yourself, because that's what's expected of you, right? The irony is that your empathy makes you a master of emotional CPR, but you're afraid to hand someone else the defibrillator, because if you ever let someone see the chaos inside, you worry they'll run. So you keep your cracks hidden behind perfectly timed reassurance. You hide the ache behind understanding nods. You heal others to prove you're still useful. But the cost is silence, and the silence is heavy. Here's the quiet truth, though. The healer isn't meant to heal alone. You can't pour from an empty soul, no matter how noble your intentions. The world doesn't need you to be invincible. It needs you to be real. To admit that even empathy has limits, and even light needs to rest. Because true healing doesn't come from never breaking. It comes from finally allowing yourself to mend. And maybe that's the next chapter of your story. Learning that being whole isn't selfish. It's necessary. Fifthly, the rebel who obeys their own rules. You've never liked being told what to do. The moment someone says you have to, something inside you mutters, "Watch me not." You question authority, tradition, and every system built on mindless obedience. But here's the paradox. While you resist external control with every fiber of your being, you live by one of the most rigid internal codes imaginable. You're not chaotic. You're self-disciplined. You might reject the rules of others, but you follow your own with near religious precision. You see, most people confuse rebellion with carelessness, but your rebellion is thoughtful, strategic even. You don't break rules for the thrill of it. You break them because they don't make sense. You see, hypocrisy, inefficiency, injustice, and your mind starts rewriting the playbook. It's not about anarchy, it's about autonomy. You crave freedom, not from responsibility, but from nonsense. You want to live a life designed by reason, not conformity. Psychologically, this mindset mirrors what's known as autonomous integrity, the tendency to act according to personal principles, even under social pressure. It's why Sigma INFJs can look rebellious on the surface while actually being deeply moral underneath. You follow your intuition like it's law. You don't care if it makes you the outsider, as long as it keeps you aligned with your truth. And ironically, that consistency, that unshakable inner compass, earns more respect than any form of conventional obedience ever could. But this self-imposed structure can also become a quiet burden. You set impossible standards for yourself, higher than anyone else would dare to demand. You can forgive others for being flawed, but when you fall short of your own ideals, you spiral. You punish yourself with guilt, reflection, and endless analysis. Freedom is your goal, but you cage yourself with perfectionism. You rebel against society's rules only to be ruled by your own. And yet, this paradox is what makes you formidable. You're the rare kind of person who can walk away from the crowd without losing direction. You don't rebel for attention, you rebel for alignment. You'd rather be misunderstood and authentic than accepted and fake. And in a world obsessed with validation, that makes you dangerously free. People sense that energy, that quiet defiance paired with moral conviction. It's magnetic. You're the one who calls out the nonsense everyone else ignores. You're the calm voice that says, "No, that's not right," even when it costs you comfort. You might not wear the label of a leader, but your integrity makes you one. Others follow you, not because you demand it, but because they wish they could live that honestly, too. Here's the truth. Your rebellion isn't against the world. It's against anything that tries to disconnect you from your essence. You obey yourself because you've learned the hard way that betraying your inner voice feels worse than any punishment. You're not a rule breaker. You're a rule creator. You've built a personal philosophy that makes sense in a world that often doesn't. And that's not defiance. That's wisdom. So yes, you'll keep challenging systems, questioning authority, and rewriting the script when it doesn't fit. Not because you're difficult, but because you know peace isn't found in submission. It's found in self-respect. And that's the quiet rebellion of the Sigma INFJ. You don't fight the world to win. You fight it to stay yourself. And sixthly, the dreamer who plans like a strategist. People assume you live in your head, that you're the quiet daydreamer lost in imagination, the idealist who floats above reality, but that's only half the story. You don't just dream, you architect. You take your visions apart piece by piece and rebuild them until they can stand on their own in the real world. You fantasize like a poet, but you plan like an engineer. You don't just see possibilities, you reverse engineer them into blueprints. That's the Sigma INFJ Paradox. The dreamer who doesn't just imagine the castle in the sky, but figures out how to build a staircase to it. Your mind is a strange combination of intuition and logic, spirituality and spreadsheets. You'll have an abstract revelation about your life's purpose one moment, and then open a color-coded calendar to schedule how you'll achieve it the next. People underestimate you because they mistake your quiet reflection for passivity. What they don't realize is that while they're still talking about what they want to do, you've already drafted the framework for how it'll happen. Psychologically, this duality is rooted in what's called intuitive foresight. Studies suggest that intuitive thinkers like INFJs have higher neural activity in regions associated with pattern recognition and long-term simulation. You don't just visualize outcomes, you feel them before they exist. That's why you're often 2 steps ahead of everyone else. It's not luck or magic, it's data your subconscious has already processed. You see trajectories the way others see facts. And yet that foresight can be isolating. When you share your ideas, people call them unrealistic until you quietly make them happen. You don't waste energy convincing anyone anymore. You'd rather show results. You've learned that visionaries are rarely understood at first, and you've made peace with being the quiet outlier in a room full of noise. That's your advantage. You don't need validation to move forward. You trust your inner compass, even when the world calls it a fantasy. But there's also a shadow to this paradox. Your mind never stops. You're constantly analyzing outcomes, mapping future scenarios, and trying to control variables that don't even exist yet. You're always 10 conversations ahead, 10 possibilities deep. It's strategic brilliance, but it's also mental exhaustion. You have the soul of an artist trapped in the brain of a tactician. And when those two start arguing, sleep doesn't stand a chance. Still, this duality is your greatest gift. You can take abstract emotion and turn it into something tangible. An idea, a message, a movement. You see meaning where others see randomness. You connect dots that others don't even notice exist. And that makes you both the dreamer and the doer, the philosopher and the planner. So yes, you dream big. You build worlds in your mind that seem impossible, but you also quietly take the steps to make them real. You balance your heart and your head like it's an art form. And that's the Sigma INFJ's secret weapon. You don't just hope for change, you design it. While others wait for the future, you're already constructing it, brick by invisible brick, guided by vision, intuition, and just enough madness to make it all work. Last but not least, the truth. They'll never admit. You spend your life trying to understand everyone, reading between their words, feeling what they don't say, decoding every silence like it's your native language. But the truth you'll never admit is this. While you're busy understanding everyone else, what you really want is for someone to finally understand you. You don't just crave to be loved, you crave to be known. to be seen in all your contradictions and still chosen. That's the heart of the Sigma INFJ Paradox. The constant balance between revealing and retreating, between wanting connection and fearing exposure. You've built an identity around mystery, but mystery is just a mask for safety. You hide behind depth because you're afraid of being misunderstood on the surface. You give people pieces of yourself, a story here, an insight there, but never the whole picture. You tell yourself it's because no one would really get it. But deep down, you're protecting the most fragile truth of all. You want to be seen, but you don't trust anyone to look gently enough. Psychologically, this comes from what therapists call selective vulnerability. You reveal emotion only in environments that feel completely safe, which for you is almost nowhere. You learned early that being open can lead to being used. So now, every time someone tries to get close, your mind scans them like an airport security system. Do they mean it? Can they handle it? Will they leave when they see the whole picture? And if the answer isn't a confident yes, the door quietly locks again. But what's beautiful and painful is that you still hope. You still hold on to this tiny ember of belief that somewhere out there, someone exists who will look past your walls without trying to break them down. Someone who won't confuse your silence with indifference or your solitude with arrogance. Someone who sees that your contradictions aren't flaws, they're survival mechanisms. Proof that you've felt deeply and kept feeling anyway. And maybe that's why people find you unforgettable. They can't quite figure you out. You're too kind to be cold, too distant to be desperate, too complex to be comfortable. You make people feel something they can't name, and that mystery stays with them long after you've gone quit. You're not easy to know, but that's what makes knowing you sacred. You're the rare person whose depth isn't performance, it's truth. The paradox in the end isn't about mystery or solitude, it's about meaning. You move through the world, searching for something real enough to stay. You question, observe, retreat, return, and through it all, you keep holding space for humanity, even when it disappoints you. Because underneath every contradiction is one simple truth. You care. You always have. You just hide it behind intelligence, sarcasm, and carefully measured silence. So when someone finally looks at you and says, I see you, really see you, every guarded, brilliant, overthinking part, that's when you'll stop running. Not because they solved you, but because they didn't try to. Because the Sigma INFJ paradox isn't about being hard to understand. It's about waiting for someone who understands that you were never meant to be easy. You were meant to be real. If this resonated with you or called you out just a little too accurately, hit that like button, drop a comment, and tell me which paradox hit hardest. Because the world doesn't need more people pretending to be simple. It needs more people brave enough to embrace their contradictions.